Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Welcome again. Welcome to the lecture series on monetary and fiscal framework in Islamic finance with the course code of MBF707 from ComSat's Institute of Information Technology, Virtual Campus, Islamabad. Students, we are now almost concluding our course. Today's lecture is second part of the conclusion and summary of the course which we have studied so far during the course of this semester. Students, in part 1 of the summary of the course, our focus was on monetary policy tools in Islamic framework and how does the monetary policy work, what are the goals of the monetary policy, what can be the possible tools, and our focus was basically on the participatory type of investment, and in this course we suggested a different name of the conventional banks if they are converted to the Islamic modes of finance or the institutions which function according to the Islamic principles. And some of the Islamic economists suggested the new name of Islamic banks as joint stock companies. Some others have suggested the name of banks as the investment institution, and some other economists, and there are different names assigned by some of the other economists in Islam. Whatever the name, but the important thing is function. Our today's lecture is the summary of the fiscal policy side of the course, and in fiscal policy we have studied different models, incorporating Zakat as one of the major fiscal tools, and we also studied Faridi model wherein the three sectors have been introduced. So we will today briefly review this part of the course which covers fiscal policy in Islamic framework. In Islamic financial system, fiscal policy possess significant role to play. The main elements of the theory, Islamic economy is a three-sector economy. This is according to one of the approaches in Islamic fiscal policy. Number one, so these three sectors includes number one, private sector, and number two, public sector, and the third is voluntary sector of the economy. These three sectors working in coordination with each other develop an institutional framework for an Islamic economic system. This is number one. Number two, Zakat holds very significant role to play in the fiscal policy of Islamic economy. And the allocation, the distribution and stabilization functions of the Islamic economy are processed and implemented through all these sectors jointly, because in Islamic framework there's no question of discoordination between or among the sectors, because all the sectors of the economy are pursuing the same goal, and that is the welfare of the people, and number two, ensuring the implementation of modes of finance in accordance with the Islamic principles, and these Islamic principles have been drawn from Quran, Sunnah, and the practices of the followers of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then the followers of the follower of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in today's world, the modes and the tools of fiscal policy which have been developed, which are being developed through ijma. So public sector role is minimum on the pattern of free market economy, but obviously the divine law is implemented in case of Islamic fiscal policy, but in the conventional fiscal policy, no divine law applies. So divine principles are supreme in the implementation of the implementation of the fiscal tools in an Islamic economy, and the state holds a very important role. It is basically the custodian of the Ummah, or custodian of the general public. So state is responsible to ensure the basic necessities of each and everybody in the state. And how state will make sure that everybody is receiving at least basic needs of his life. Obviously, the state has different tools, different measures to apply, and these measures include obviously the Zakat system, the redistribution system, the distributional system, the system of distributive justice, and the protection and the security of the economic stakeholders in accordance with the principles of Islam. Similarly, in this perspective, although the states or the Islamic states intervention in the economic activities is minimum, in the sense that the government will not control the prices, the government will not interfere in the market forces, government will not unnecessarily support one competitor against the other competitors in the market, but the government at the same time holds very significant role to play in the smooth functioning of the economic activities of the country. And how government can ensure, obviously this requires a regulatory framework for the implementation of Islamic principles of finance and economy, and the government will provide complete protection and security in terms of law regulations for the running of business activities of the economic stakeholders in the economy. Question is, there was question when we study fiscal policy in conventional framework, the question arises whether the fiscal policy in Islamic state or Islamic framework exists. Is it possible to apply fiscal policy tools in an Islamic state or Islamic economic framework? Obviously, yes. The answer is indeed yes. The socio-economic policy goals of an Islamic state are, however, different from the conventional state, and they are as follows. Justice and equity will be the supreme principle in applying and designing the fiscal policy. Provision of the socio-economic needs of community or socio-economic welfare, as I mentioned earlier. Enhancement of the community's economic resources or economic growth, and improvement in the cultural milieu of the community. So in this framework, in the achievement of these policy goals, obviously Zakat is one of the key variables, the main institutional arrangement which is to be done by the state in Islamic framework. So Zakat with its full force and with its full spirit and letter will be implemented in an Islamic state. Zakat may generate certain incidental effects on the economy which can be redressed only by an appropriate mechanism of the secular levies. A situation may arise where Zakat levies may lead to such a diversion of resources that is not desirable from the point of view of the general socio-economic goals of the society. But here, state holds very important responsibility to make sure that the socio-economic goals are appropriately achieved and no lapses, no inequalities arise in the economy. The transfer of resources may exert an upward pressure on the price level, but at the same time, if state is holding and implementing a taxation system or the system of redistribution, then this big push in the aggregate demand through the implementation of Zakat system can be curtailed, or aggregate demand can be managed by imposing additional taxes, which in fact decrease the purchasing power to some extent, and the pressure which is built in terms of aggregate demand in the economy is reduced to greater extent. Then the three-sector economy, and the three-sector economy basically the private sector, yes, the profit maximization is the one of the objectives, but that is not the only goal in Islamic framework. Number two, the voluntary sector of the economy, which contributes in terms of donation, charity, infaq, and the other some of the obligations, for example, zakat and fitr and all these things, they definitely exist, which function as automatic stabilizer. We have discussed the automatic stabilizer functioning in an Islamic state, how the different system functions. The classical concept is in fact different. The classical concept in conventional economics is that supply creates its own demand, and if there is any lapse, there is any gap between the demand and the supply, that gap is automatically filled by the system. But what happened after the World War, this classical philosophy did not work. The automatic removal of the lapses, the automatic recovery of the economy did not work, and the economy ultimately stuck into a great recession, which turned into a depression. Then the Keynesian economics started, and the Keynesian suggested government intervention, maximum government intervention. Now, Keynesian economics actually criticized the classical economics, and they gave different explanation for the Great Depression. But the question is, does such type of huge economic recession or Great Depression occurs in the economy which is functioning, which is being run in accordance with the principles of Islamic finance? The answer is indeed very simple, that the parameters incorporated in Islamic framework are so strong, the institution is so strongly integrated with the rest of the economic activities, that such type of possibility of recession or depression is simply ruled out. There is no chance of such a Great Depression. You can take the example of even Pakistan economy, which is not functioning in accordance with the true principles of Islamic modes of finance or the Islamic financial system. But at the individual level, at the individual group level, some people from the community are functioning and implementing in accordance with the Islamic financial system. For example, the system of charity, the distribution of zakah, and some of the groups are even very particular and very much disciplined in the collection of zakah and then the redistribution of zakah in the system. And that is why Pakistan, despite all its economic problems, cannot default and could not default, and inshallah it cannot default so far as the small scale businesses are concerned. Over there, the aggregate demand continues to exist and prevail. Just because people distribute, people have very strong redistribution system, they donate money, they help the have-nots. The haves are integrated with the have-nots in the sense somehow they are contributing for the well-being, for the financial and the economic support of the have-nots. Now, this built-in system, although which is not very strongly functioning, but to some extent it is functioning in terms of some of the group which are strongly active, which are very active in supporting the poor people. Now, because of the existence of this system in Pakistani society, the small-scale industries are functioning, and the economic activities in the informal sector hold very great proportion of the total economic size of the economy. That is why there is no possibility of Great Depression in the economies like Pakistan. Now, a question arises: okay, if the Great Depression is not the possibility in an Islamic society, so is there what are the basically what are the multipliers in an Islamic financial system on the pattern of the multipliers in the conventional system? In conventional economic system, this is how the multipliers function. For example, they have different names. For example, consumption expenditure multiplier, the investment multiplier, the public sector or the government expenditure multiplier. So, for simplicity, if we ignore the business multiplier or the autonomous investment multiplier, in simple form, the multiplier in an economy, in a conventional economy, functions like this. So, if we increase government expenditure by $1, the national income is likely to increase by $5 if size of the multiplier is 5 and the marginal propensity to consume is 80%, which means if people who are receiving an increase in their income through economic activities, they spent 80% of this income and they save 20%. So, just 80% spending, 80% of the income spent in the economic activity ends up with the final cumulative increase in national income of 5 times if the size of MPC is 0.8, and if this MPC slightly increases, the size of multiplier will also increase. Now, first we briefly discussed the conventional system. This is how the multiplier functions in an economy. So, graphically it has been shown that with the decrease in taxes, there is a reverse multiplier effect, as it was positive effect in case of increase in government expenditures. In case of government expenditure, there was positive effect of multiplier or the MPC, and there is a negative effect of increase in taxes. Then on the conventional economic system. So what is the thing which exists in the Islamic framework working as multiplier? Zakat is one of the biggest source of multiplier in an economy. Later on, we will discuss how this Zakat system functions. Here in this formula for multiplier, where 1 over 1 minus MPC is written, this MPC is the marginal propensity to consume out of conventional income sources. But in an Islamic financial system, this MPC is augmented with the marginal propensity to receive zakat. The zakat money received after the receipt of zakat money, the zakat recipients spend according to their marginal propensity to consume. So that would be another component of marginal propensity to consume in an Islamic financial system, by which the cumulative increase in national income will be much higher than this number 5, even if the marginal propensity to consume is 0.8. But in the existence of the marginal propensity to in the existence of the zakat system, this marginal propensity to consume is augmented by receiving zakat, and tax function the other way around. This is as far as the existence of zakat system is concerned in an Islamic financial system. if we go side by side with the promotion and growth and the development of economic ideas in conventional system, we can find out some parallels in the Islamic financial system as well. In 1980s, what happened? The supply side policy was adopted. So just after Great Depression, the demand side policy was adopted, wherein the government intervention was emphasized great. But Islamic financial system is moderate, and it has built some automatic stabilizer which function automatically in order to protect economy against great shocks. As far as the supply side is concerned, and on the supply side, during 1980s, in the Western economies, the supply side was introduced, whereby the on fiscal side, the tax cut policy was introduced, and all the measures, all different measures which were basically supply friendly were introduced and supported by the government in the Western economies. And this gave birth to the new classical economics. In Islamic framework, we have golden principles from Quran and Sunnah. I shared with you some findings from Surah Yusuf, wherein Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam was given the responsibility of managing the state affairs, where it was forecast that there will be famine after 7-8 years, and the first 7-8 years will be of good crop, there will be bumper crop, and Yusuf alayhi salam managed it very well. Same principle we follow in the Islamic financial system. At good times, the zakat payers are many more than the zakat recipients. So at the time of the boom period, when economic activities are fast, when the resources are being dynamically utilized and the economy is generating more income, so there are more sahib-e-nisab than the zakat recipients. So at this time, obviously the distribution of zakat will be much less than the actual collection of zakat. So this zakat money, which is saved by the state at good time, can be used when there is recessionary situation. During recession, since the incomes of the people decrease, so the zakat payers will be decreased in number at the time of recession or when the economic activities slow down. Slowing down of the economic activities and increase of the economic activities, or in simply speaking, the fluctuation in the economic activities, is a natural phenomena which intuitively exists in any economy, including the Islamic countries or the economies which will be run in accordance with the principles of Islamic finance. Then I shared with you some of the resources of the Islamic State in old time. Zakah was very well established institution by the Islamic State. Kharaj was, which is land tax, was regularly collected, and jizya, since the Islamic State was dominating the world and the size of the geography of the Islamic State was spreading like anything. So most of the non-Muslims, they sought asylum in the Islamic State, or their security and safety was actually the responsibility of the Islamic State or the Islamic rulers. So Islamic states and Islamic rulers, in return for their safety and security, demanded the poll tax. So non-Muslims paid this type of tax in return for their security and safety. Then ghanima, since the Islamic states were having wars, and the Islamic teachings were spreading throughout the world, so many areas were conquered, and ghanima, spoils of war, was a very common phenomena which was collected, and this also became the part of Baitul Mal. Although part of it was distributed, among the commanders fighting war against the non-Muslims. Then 5 was also some collection properties received from the enemies, which was collected generally without the actual war happened. Ushur, which is the custom duties, these are also very common. Then here I also shared with you the period of Caliph Ma'mun al-Rashid. Imam Abu Yusuf, he was the Chief Justice, and he actually developed a blueprint for fiscal policy for the Islamic State. So Imam Abu Yusuf, to great emphasis, suggested that the taxes should not be levied in an Islamic state. So utmost effort should be done not to levy any tax in Islamic state. Yes, at the time of financial constraint, if the Islamic state fails to run its day-to-day affairs successfully, or there are chances of losing power and the attacks from the enemy from outside world, then Islamic State can levy taxes, and these taxes should be levied on the ability to pay principle. Only those who can afford to pay taxes should be levied taxes, and the Islamic system suggests direct taxes. Distribution of Zakat, then we discussed how another obligatory and built-in system functions in the line of fiscal policy in Islam. Quran has identified 8 possible categories where the Zakat money can be distributed, and we discussed in detail, we deliberated in detail the poor, the needy, the Zakat administrator, the new convert to Islam, and slaves, and the debtor, those who are working on the path of Allah, in the way of Allah, one who fights for the cause of Allah, and those who are in the way of Allah preaching Islam. So, and then even the wayfarer are also at times justified. So basically, if you go through one by one of all these 8 categories, almost every part, every corner of the economy has been addressed. Almost every economic stakeholder has been addressed in the distribution of Zakah. And this actually speaks out the strength of the fiscal policy in Islamic framework. Now, national income, where it comes from or where it goes, is the general question in conventional system. And in conventional economic system, the factor of the production produce national income, and in closed economy, 3-sector closed economy, this output which is produced and supplied is meant for meeting the demand which is generated by, number 1, household sector, number 2, the demand generated by the business sector, and number 3, the demand generated by the public sector. So the simple answer to the question as to where national income comes from and where it goes, so the factor of the production produce national income. Now the equilibratic force is the interest rate in ISLM framework, particularly in the goods market equilibrium. This R plays a very significant role in bringing together the demand and the supply side, so that the goods market is in the form of equilibrium. But in Islamic framework, the situation is different. In Islamic framework, now we will deliberate in detail. The sources of income are, for example, the sources of income in an Islamic framework include income through wages, working somewhere. If some people are employed somewhere, they are working, they are rendering their services. In reward for their services, they are receiving income, which is known as the wage money. The second source of income, we are actually trying to answer the question, national income, where it comes from in an Islamic financial system. So in an Islamic financial system, there are three sources from where the income is generated. Number one, the wage, salaries, and number two, the income generated through assets. When assets are utilized, the rent is earned, and or the assets are utilized on the participatory basis, and the income is distributed in accordance with the principles of Islamic finance. The third source of income, where national income comes from, is the profit earning. For example, if there is musharaka-based, mudarba-based investment in the economy, that musharaka-based investment in the economy among or between the shareholders, the profit is distributed in accordance with the formula or the proportion agreed between the two or more parties, but the loss is shared between or among the shareholders in accordance with their financial contribution. So the third source of earning is therefore profit in an Islamic financial system. As far as GDP is concerned, GDP is basically the value of market value of all final halal goods and services produced in the economy. So all those activities, all economic activities in an Islamic financial system should be in the permissible range. No activity out of the Islamic limits is allowed. Therefore, so halal is not only the production. Halal means not only the goods which are permissible in Islam should be produced and their transaction is allowed in the economy, but also the activities which are otherwise halal, the goods which are being transacted, which are being sold and purchased, they are halal. But the transactions which are involved in such commodities, they should also be in the permissible range. For example, the sale and purchase of the daily produced goods and services, if interest is involved, then obviously the transaction is prohibited, although the goods are permissible. इसी तरह अगर कोई शख्स जो है, if he is selling and buying different durable items, but he is cheating, he is involved in black marketing, or he is involved in hoarding, intentionally hoarding the commodities in order to raise price and then in future with the intention of earning more profit. So such type of economic activities are prohibited in Islamic financial system. Then in the end we tried to develop a model which is known as the Islamic policy, Islamic fiscal policy model. So in this Islamic fiscal policy model, the GDP of the economy, obviously almost all the Islamic economists have suggested three-sector model to be followed in Islamic framework, because the fourth sector, which is the foreign sector, there are certain reservations at this stage to be included in the equation of GDP or the national income. And what is the reason why exports and imports are for the time being excluded? There are two reasons. Number one is that the model has been intentionally kept very simple so that everybody could understand the relationships of these variables. Secondly, at this stage, none of the Islamic country is a bigger economy, or the bigger economy is that economy which has an influence in the global system. So unfortunately, there's no single economy in the world which can make dent in the global economic system by its economic decisions. So therefore, the Islamic economies are compelled to do their transactions in accordance with the international financial system, even if they are internally they are implementing the Islamic financial system. So there are three components in an Islamic framework, three components of GDP. And what are those components? Number one, the consumption, and then consumption is further divided into two components. One, the consumption by the Zakat payers, and two, consumption by those who are receiving Zakat. So C1 category actually includes those who are known as Sahibe Nisab, who can pay Zakat, who pay Zakat. This is consumption representing that particular group, जिनको हम haves कह सकते हैं. And CZ or CZ is the consumption expenditures by the Zakat recipients. I is for investment, G is for government expenditures. Here in this model we are assuming I and G as the autonomously given components of aggregate demand. Then we discussed the three major sources of national income: wages, assets, generated income, and the income generated in terms of profit. So, so total GDP of the economy can have these components as indicated in equation 3. The three income sources plus the indirect taxes, obviously, which go to the government out of these income sources, and the depreciation. Depreciation of the capital, because the amount of capital which is used up in generating this income actually is also part of the income. Therefore, this component has also been added in equation number 3. Then personal income, equation number 4, has four major components. The personal income of rich category of the economy. So number one, this personal income is allocated, number one, for consumption purpose of the Zakat payers. Part of income goes to savings and Zakah in accordance with the proportion of Nisab, and the taxes which go to the government. So four basic components are there within which the income is distributed. The consumption of this category, Sahib-e-Nisab, is indicated by equation number 5. The autonomous consumption plus marginal propensity to consume of the Zakat payers, and within brackets of equation number 5, the disposable income. What is disposable income? How it is calculated? The actual personal income minus Zakat payment minus tax payment. So whatever is left over is known as the disposable income on the pattern of conventional economy or conventional fiscal policy. Then the consumption expenditures of the Zakat recipients. There are two major components of the consumption expenditures of the Zakat recipient. Number one, autonomous consumption expenditures, the expenditures which are independent of the situation whether Zakat is received or not. Some consumption expenditures have to be incurred either through borrowing or from any other source. The other component of equation 6, the consumption expenditure in accordance with the marginal propensity to consume, and this ZE is the Zakat disbursement by the state. So basically, if marginal propensity to consume is most probably equal to 1 in case of the Zakat recipient, if this is the only source which they are spending, earning or getting from the Zakat payers, or through the institution of Zakat, which has been arranged by the state, they spend 100% of this Zakat, then marginal propensity to consume out of Zakat is 1. And the ultimate equation is equation number 6b. Then we also deliberate, by taking the differential of this equation, which is in fact the identity equation number 6z. If we take differential of this equation, we can understand that the marginal propensity to consume of Zakat recipient plus marginal propensity to save of Zakat recipient, it makes 1 when added together. The total consumption in the economy has been indicated by equation number 7. Consumption in an Islamic financial system has 2 major components. One, the consumption expenditures incurred by the Zakat recipients, and 2, the consumption expenditures incurred by the Zakat payers. C1 indicates Zakat payers and CZ indicates the consumption expenditures incurred by the Zakat recipients. Then we developed the model of the model of the collection of zakah in an economy, how zakah is collected. Since we identified in the beginning of this model 3 income sources, so it means there are 3 categories in the economy earning or generating income. So the zakah distribution or the zakat collection will be from these 3 major sources. The first source, zakat collected from the salaried class or the income or those who are receiving certain pay package and they are covered under nisab. So their zakat function will be equation number 8. The other things we have already discussed in the regular lectures. Then the asset category, those who are receiving or generating income through their assets, either through rent or through some other valuation of their assets. So if A naught is the asset at the start of the period, then on the completion of the period, the value of asset is calculated simply through compounding formula. But here, compounding does not mean that we are incorporating the interest. Rather, it is the growth of value of the asset during this particular period. So zakat, therefore, zakat function, equation number 9 indicates the zakat function of the asset holders who are earning through their assets, whose income source is assets. This simple calculation of the value of the asset in the start of the period, at the end of the period, and then calculation of zakah according to the zakat rate on the applied on the zakatable assets. The third source of zakah distribution is the category of people whose income source is profit. So they have already invested money and they are now regularly receiving profits in accordance with the Islamic modes of finance. And we also discuss the allocation of certain amount of profit to the research and development, training, innovation, because Islamic economy is a dynamic economy. So financial system in an Islamic framework is not static, rather it is dynamic and it continues innovating, it continues spending certain amount of money on R&D, training of the workers or the people during the job, so that their skills, their capability, their productivity continues improving for the purpose of competing with the rest of the world in terms of innovation, in terms of increasing skill, in terms of increasing the technological advancement. Equation number 12 indicates the total amount of zakah collected from all the 3 income sources. The income source, wage or pay package, and the income source, asset, and the income source, the investment in terms of profit. Then we applied certain assumption that if zakah rate is the same applied to all the 3 categories, then how the function can be reduced to equation number 3. Uh, then another fiscal tool which we focused in our lecture series is tax collection. Again, tax collection is, since there are three major income sources, so the tax collection also targets these three income sources. The tax collected from the salaried class, the tax collected from the asset holders, the tax collected from those who have invested and they are earning through profit. So this way, when we added together all the three taxation sources, the equation comes out to be equation number 17, and further simplification gives us equation 17b. And when we assume that the tax rate is identical on all the three income sources, then the equation number 17b is further reduced to equation number 18. So now summing up the income sources of the Islamic State in Islamic financial system, two major sources. Number one, the generation of Zakat. Number two, the collection of taxes. And then at the same time, yes, the Islamic State may be partner in a number of projects with the private sector. The Islamic State may be functioning on the regular basis of implementation of istisna. The Islamic State may be functioning in partnership, in musharaka, in mudarba, with some private companies, some international companies, some multinational companies from the Islamic world, or even the non-Islamic world, if they are ready to function in accordance with the principles of musharaka, and they are ready to share the losses if they occur, and if they wanted to share profit in accordance with the agreed proportion among the parties or between the two parties, the Islamic State and the rest of the world. So total zakat, so basically we aggregated all the revenue sources, and then Islamic State takes measures to spend this money by different methods. So obviously the Islamic State, looking at certain factors, may give some exemptions to some of the people from obviously Islamic State cannot give exemption from Zakat, because Zakat is fixed, it is religious obligation. The Islamic State cannot waive any party from paying Zakat, but Islamic State definitely can reduce taxes. Islamic State can add taxes in accordance with the economic circumstances or economic conditions in the country. So Islamic State from time to time will decide as to how much exemption should be granted. For example, if the private sector is earning profit and they are not distributing the entire profit among the shareholders, rather their approach is more optimistic and they retain part of the profit and reinvest either in their business, or they allocate certain amount of money for the development of for the research and development, and they also allocate some amount of money for the training of their staff, so that the staff gets state-of-the-art training from different institutions. And then after acquiring this training, after getting the certification in terms of training from different internationally recognized institutions, they can contribute in a better way in an Islamic financial system. We also derived marginal propensity functions out of different sources of income. For example, the autonomous income, the exemption, the regular income pay. We also discussed the effect of taxation system on the consumption expenditures, and it came out to be negative. But most of the other indicators of Zakat have shown, or autonomous or exemption, have shown positive effect on consumption. Then on the demand side, this is the demand side of the economy, and here in the bottom, the equation given at the bottom of this slide number 43 indicates how the aggregate demand can be balanced against the national income generated in the economy. So from here we calculated the multiplier, different types of multiplier. For example, autonomous consumption expenditure multiplier, which is obviously positive with increase in autonomous consumption. The national income is likely to increase through a multiplier process. And we discuss what is multiplier process. In the multiplier process, the expenditures of one party become the income of another party, which subsequently spends, and it becomes the income of the other party, another group. And this system continues in each stage of expenditure. Certain demand is accumulated to aggregate demand, and this aggregate demand ultimately promotes or induces people to invest more, to generate more income, to produce more output in the economy. And this is how the multiplier process in the end contributes towards the GDP of the economy, or national output is increased many times. We also discussed the tax multiplier. If you remember, in the Zakat system, tax multiplier, obviously they function negatively. They have reverse impact through multiplier effect. Similarly, we also discussed the positive effect of autonomous expenditure multiplier, and then the Zakat multiplier, the autonomous government expenditure multiplier, and and other sources of spending multiplier. But in all these multipliers, you can see the difference, how they are different from the multiplier of conventional economic system. So in an Islamic financial system, the multiplier intuitively incorporate so many factors, so many indicators. For example, there is marginal propensity created out of zakat money, marginal propensity created out of transfer payments, for example, charity, donation, and other financial assistance, scholarships, or other financial assistance which is provided by haves to the have-nots category of the economy. So these additional components of multiplier, they strongly hold economy, and they prevent economy from any sort of potential depression or recession, and they also manage the ever rising increase in demand when the economy is booming. So that is why we say they function as the automatic stabilizers in an Islamic financial system, particularly when the Islamic fiscal policy is implemented. It is more balanced, it is more extended, and it involves more people and more economic stakeholders of the economy than the conventional fiscal policy. Well, students, now coming to the conclusion part. Although the conclusion naturally has to be very big, but I have tried to minimize it to maximum extent. So in these lectures, we incorporated Zakat into a simple macroeconomic model of Islamic economy to analyze the impact of Zakat on the determination of equilibrium income, and we wanted to see how Zakat plays its role in the demand management policy. 2, we derive the aggregate consumption function in reduced form and found that the determinants of consumption are zakat expenditure, taxes, income, asset holdings of the individual. 3, we cannot change the zakat rate to dampen the macroeconomic fluctuations, but we can change the exemption rate, we can change the taxation rate, we can change the tax system in terms of their allocation to different components of the economy, to different economic stakeholders. The role of Zakat in the demand management policy is through the non-discretionary or built-in stabilizers and discretionary policy. The built-in stabilizer mechanism occurs when Zakat collection is automatically reduced during the recession, giving more money to the people who spend, and this way they support the aggregate demand, and therefore the recession is automatically prevented from moving towards depression. So recession cannot move towards depression, so this is automatic stabilizer to support the Islamic economy, which is functioning according to the Islamic financial system. Similarly, during the boom period, more Zakat is collected, reducing the ability of the people to spend, which tends to dampen the economic activities. Because if aggregate demand increases like anything, and on the other side, productive capacity, enhancement of productive capacity needs some time. You cannot increase productive capacity of the economy overnight. You have to have machinery, planning of including new machinery, adding more building, increasing investment and adding more capital to the existing stock of capital, and then the management of factors of production. So all these things require long term, but the demand may increase in the short run. Therefore, the demand management policy and conventional economic system are poorer or weaker than the demand management policy during the boom time period in the Islamic financial system. In the case of discretionary fiscal policy, the government varies the disbursement of Zakat to the recipients and the exemption levels to the Zakat payers whenever necessary during the phases of the business cycle. So during the expansion phase of the business cycle, the government may want to decrease Zakat disbursement and exemption levels to reduce aggregate spending of Zakat payers and thus prevent economy from overheating. This action, coupled with the fall in the number of eligible Zakat recipients, will help increase the Zakat surplus in Baitul Mal, and this surplus can be later on utilized in terms of redistribution in order to support the demand, aggregate demand at the time of recession, when the number of Zakat payers is reduced and the number of Zakat recipients is increased, and at the same time the Zakat collection is also decreased. So the government, out of its previous stocks of money, can utilize to support the increasing number of Zakat recipients. This will again automatically stabilize or manage the demand system in an Islamic framework. Zakat, government spending, taxation, in complementary with each other, function as the economic stability policy or for the purpose of stabilization of the economy. So, students, thank you very much. This has completed our course with the title of Monetary Fiscal Framework in Islamic Finance, with the course code of MBF707, Comsat Institute of Information Technology, Virtual Campus, Islamabad. So there were two major components of the course: the monetary policy, and the other is fiscal policy. And effort has been made to make the distinction of Islamic monetary system from the conventional monetary system. Effort has been made to make you understand how the functions of Islamic banks are different from the functions of conventional banks. What are the possible alternatives of finance, alternatives to the interest-based modes of finance? We introduced different options which are more dynamic, wherein the participation of all the shareholder is ensured, and since all the participants are participating in loss as well as profit, so therefore they remain very keen regarding the business activities or the increasing or decreasing or fluctuating activities of the business enterprises. And this is a good thing if all the stakeholders are taking interest, and because their interest is both in terms of loss and in terms of profit. But this is not the situation in Islamic financial system, in conventional economic system, I beg pardon. In conventional economic system, one part of the community or economy, which are financial or financial institutions, their stake is only the allocation of funds in terms of loans, and then they are ready to regularly receive interest payments without facing any risk of loss. So in most of the cases, the interest earned is even much higher than the amount of loan paid to the borrowers. So the system of interest is therefore not based on justice, because one part of the community is aggressor, creating aggression and compulsion on the other part of the community, who is bound to work hard, produce more income, charge high prices in the economy in order to pay back interest in addition to the principal amount. And a penalty is levied when the installment in terms of interest or the principal amount is not paid by the borrower. But such things, such aggressive things, do not exist in Islamic financial system. On the fiscal part of the course, our main focus was a very important fiscal component, that is Zakat. Taxation is also part of the fiscal policy in Islamic financial system, but tax is, in normal circumstances, the tax is not the recommendation of the Islamic State. The tax is to be levied whenever there is financial constraint faced by the Islamic State, and the Islamic State is unable to meet the basic needs of the people of the country or the state, then a compulsory taxation system can be introduced by the state. Similarly, in order to enhance the security system, in order to enhance the economic strength of the system, in order to build infrastructure, the state can take different measures. We also discussed different options of istisna, wherein government can be engaged for the creation of mega projects in the economy. For example, if countries like Pakistan, who is facing a lot of energy crisis, this energy crisis can be overcome by building the fund, the consortium fund, and this consortium can be built by the financial institutions of the country, which can also engage some international level banks from the Islamic countries who can share funds. So this mutual fund can be utilized to build energy capacity of the economy like Pakistan, and then on the basis of istisna, these projects can be handed over to the state, who will continue paying the installments in order to retire the price plus profit to the consortium or the members of the financial institution funds. So this was our these were some of the recommendations of our this course. So our strong recommendation is of istisna, the mutual funds, the consortium of financial institutions, and also consortium of the business enterprises. So with these words, students, thank you very much. I hope this course was helpful in understanding the Islamic financial system, Islamic monetary system, and the functioning of fiscal policy in an Islamic framework. Thank you. Allah Hafiz. See you in some other course if time permit and if life permit.